Welcome to Take Care of Yourself with me. I'm Tara Sweiger.
I'm Jolie.
Hello, welcome. We have been talking, Jolie, about Enneagram back and forth to each other, and you are actually studying it as part of your life coaching certification. So, can you explain to people who might not know what is the Enneagram?
So, Enneagram is like another personality test, like Myers-Briggs or all of those types of fun things like that we love to do and take quizzes. So Enneagram is another one of those. My course actually calls it Core Motivations, which
Hmm.
I think is a little bit more like self-descriptive. It's basically what motivates you, like what's your biggest driver, and in terms of like how you react to stress and anger. So, whatever, there's like 9 categories, and they're usually just referred to by their number. So, you're like a 1 or a 2. And there's a description for like when you're your best self. And then there's a description for when you have maybe a lot of stress or triggers going on in your life and how that kind of brings out a different side of you.
Yeah, I love that. And what I like about thinking of it as core motivations is because we've talked about the four tendencies, the book by Gretchen Rubin. You guys can go back and listen to the old episode about that if you want to learn more. But that's really about how you react to expectations, both internal and external. And like, but she even says, like, this isn't all aspects of your personality. This is just how do you react to expectations, which is really helpful if you're trying to get things done. But knowing your motivation and knowing like how that the motivation can like go wrong or how the motivation can help you be your best self, I find like super helpful. And it's also, I think, different than like we talked about strengths in last week's episode.
Mm-hmm.
And we haven't talked about Myers-Briggs, but we should one day. I basically feel like maybe this like session of the podcast, these couple episodes are like, I took personality psychology in college and loved it. Like we're doing our own little personality psychology series. But like Myers-Briggs is more about like your personality traits. And I feel like this is really just about like what motivates you. And do you find, so I've talked to a couple people about their Enneagram. Almost everybody I talk to about it is like sad when they read it, like they're disappointed that it's them because it's the things inside of them that they don't like. Have you found that too?
Yeah, I think so my course dives really deep into it, and there's a lot of like people will have trouble choosing between a couple of them because we don't give people a quiz. We let them read the descriptions and self-identify. And so often there's a struggle. And for a couple of them, it will say like people nearly if people are deliberating between this one and this one, it's nearly always the other one because there are certain ones where like people want to identify
Right.
as that, and they like so yeah there's a definitely like a thing where there are some that for like if you're one of the so I think it's a 3, right? A 3 is a
Mhm.
doer, which they always want to be the best, but a lot of times like when they're not their best self, they're doing their best based on other people's values. So
Mhm.
threes will often misidentify themselves as a 6, no, as a 5, which is the expert, because
Right.
the expert is like the good, like knows everything, right? So it's interesting. Yeah, there's a lot of like, this is kind of who I'd like to be or who I think I should be, and not so much like this is who I am.
Yeah, definitely. And also like when you realize like what motivates you, you're like, like I want to not be motivated by that thing. Like it is like we talked about this a little bit for our own ones that like you can sometimes look at your childhood or your like growing up as like teenager and becoming an adult and realizing when those things became your motivation. But when you've been learning about it, did they talk about it like it's like you're born with it or like it's nature, nurture, or are they not concerned?
No, so it's in general, the idea is that you don't change your core motivation, but um, one, we all have aspects of all of them. Two, we adopt um, aspects of other enneagrams when we're particularly stressed. Like we might, like, when one category gets stressed, it might look like a different category, but when that category is actually living their best life, it sometimes can look like a different one. So there's bits of that, but there's also in times of trauma, if you have like immense trauma in your life, that can change or affect your core motivation. Or if you've had trauma and you've been able to work through that, you can then change your core motivation. So it's not like an easy shift, but it's definitely possible.
Right. Right. That makes a lot of sense. I feel like the Enneagram is like really helpful at like identifying why somebody is being like they are, and you want to slap them, or you just literally, and Julie and I talked about this with our husbands, like you do not understand why they're doing what they're doing because your motivation, you just like can't see their motivation, or they're like, and to them it's totally logic, but it's because they're acting from a different like core place than you are.
Yeah. One of the whole reasons why we learn about this is not just to help our clients understand themselves, but it gives the coach tools for how to communicate with your client in a lot of the same way as like the 4 tendencies, knowing your client's tendency, whether they're going to respond really well to accountability because they're an obliger, or whether they might rebel against it, or whether they need things explaining if they're a questioner. Understanding someone's core motivation can definitely help you understand how to best communicate. And again, tying back into love language almost as well. Like it's all that same idea. The more you can understand someone, the more you can speak their language.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And like, and what they're saying might make more sense if you understand what's motivating it. Cause you and I even like realize like, oh, right. That's why you do that. Okay. So do you want to, well, first I feel like we should tell people how they can figure out their Enneagram. So one, the best way is that Jolie has coaching sessions. She didn't know I was going to say this, but she has coaching spots available this month, right?
Yeah.
And so you can, Jolie will help you find your style, your Enneagram number.
You can message me on Instagram. I'm at Jolie Creates, or you can go to joliecreates.com and there's a work with me tab and you can click on that. If you just want to like have a quick intro session about Enneagram and core motivation, just book a free 20-minute session with me. I'll send you the handout beforehand and I can just guide you through it. As we talk about this, if you recognize yourself in one and you recognize that you're way out of balance and you want help like really diving in, then you can book a full session with me. So it's all on joliecreates.com and then just click work with me.
Excellent. So we'll link that up in the show notes as well, which will be at takecareofyourselfpod.com. I got the link right this time. Also, if you join our Facebook group, which is Take Care of Yourself with Tara and Jolie, we'll put these links under this video and you get to see all of our episodes weeks before they come out to anyone else.
So come over to the Facebook group. Like you can also do free quizzes, but I found it really interesting because I actually, when I first learned this in coaching, I didn't know they were called Enneagrams. I hadn't heard that term until I was discussing with other people and they're like, oh, that's Enneagrams. I'm this number, I'm that number. And so Tara was taking some quizzes and we had Jay take some quizzes, Tara's husband. And it was like, actually so much easier to not do the quiz, to just read through the things. Even when I took the quizzes, like I know what number I am from reading through these and like looking at the best self and shadow self. I know my number, but the quizzes, one of them said I was equally tied between a 1, a 3, and a 5. And I'm like, those are none of my numbers. But that was like, It was like, you're all of those. And I was like, no. So the quiz can be good, but it's also like not perfect.
Well, and I feel like part of the problem, especially the quiz that just has opposites, right? Like this or this. So it'll be like loves to lead others, or the other side of it, like it's a spectrum, is prefers working by yourself.
Right.
Well, like I like to do both, but some of the questions were almost like value questions. And so your values might be of a different number than actually your core motivation is. Right? So you might value something, especially, goes back to what we were talking about with strengths last week, is if you value the things that you're not good at, right? Because like they stand out to you more because they seem harder and like you have to work at being that. And those things that just come naturally, you don't value as highly. Right. So like you're not going to want to pick it on the thing, just like subconsciously, you're just not. You're you're not into it. So I think that was what makes the quizzes harder. Whereas if you work with somebody and you talk with somebody and you kind of talk out the way it's showing up, it like becomes much clearer.
Yeah. So
all of the quizzes said I was the exact same thing. And then I talked to Jolie and I was like, darn it, I am that thing.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So I'm an 8, which the classic Enneagram calls a challenger, but the core motivation, we call it a defender. So an 8's main thing is that they like to be in control of situations. So this is interesting. This is why the quizzes can't really identify me, because how being in control of situations and not showing weakness or vulnerability, how that manifests in me is very much perfectionist. So it's the perfectionist traits of a 1, it's needing to be the best of a 3, it's getting like being really detail orientated, which is a 5. Like it's all of those things. But if you really look at why am I doing all of those things, it's because I have all these walls up, and like I feel like doing all of those things are the way to stop, like, well, if I never make a mistake, right, then I like there's no weakness, there's no vulnerability. And you know, if I'm the best, if I read every book on a subject, then I'm not going to look like an idiot and like, you know, feel ashamed and weak when I give a talk about something. So it's like I have all these traits of the other ones, but if you really dive deep into the core motivation, it's this need to be control and be like the strong one. So that's what I found like really interesting about like kind of the quizzes versus actually diving deep into the core motivation.
Absolutely. I love that. So since you shared yours, I'll share mine, even though I don't like it. I will say too that the book I read, which I'll link up in the show notes, I'm spacing on what it's called, about the Enneagram a couple years ago, talked about wings, which is, so picture the numbers around a circle. And when you're one number, you're in between 2 other numbers, right? Like 2 is in between 1 and 3. And so some people are like just a straight arrow 2, and some people lean more to 1 or they lean more to 3. Because obviously we're all a mix of a bunch of different motivations at once. And so for you, you're 8. Did you read about that? Do you lean more to the 7 or the 9?
Yes. So you told me about that, and that was super interesting because I definitely lean towards 7. And I was actually, even though none of the quizzes like really picked up on 7, I was struggling between those two. So 7 is the optimist. 7 is always looking kind of for the best and looking towards the future. So like 7s can really struggle to be happy with where they are now because they have such like big visions for the future, or they can also struggle with like the grass is always greener. Like they take one opportunity and then they're like, oh, but that one might have been nicer. Like they struggle with that, which I don't do as much, but I think because I'm such in control of my life and like my business and my decisions that like I don't struggle so much like with getting distracted by other things. But I can definitely sympathize with that dissatisfaction.
Satisfaction.
Yes, dissatisfaction. Yeah. That's it. With where I am now, because I'm like always have such big dreams and I want the best and I like the experiences. So yeah, I definitely can see myself as an 8 leaning towards a 7. And the interesting thing is like deciding between those two though was super easy because 7s value fun over control, whereas an 8 would never give up control or if something seemed more fun. And like that's me. Like there's no matter how much another job seemed fun, like I could be like, you're gonna go test Lego. Like I just could never do that because I couldn't give up like the control of my life to go work for somewhere else.
Yes. And isn't it that well, we'll get to that in a minute about sliding in like your more stress states. Because am I right that 2s slide to 8, like
yes.
Backslide?
Yes.
Yeah. Because that controlling bit is the worst of, yeah. So I am a 2, which is traditionally called the helper. And help me out here. Like, what's the core motivation in the helper?
So core motivation for a helper generally is they want to feel needed and appreciated. So that's kind of their core thing. When they're doing really well, though, they can recognize that their own needs are important and they will take care of themselves. But when they're struggling, they're putting everyone else first. They're feeling resentful that they don't have time for themselves. and they can feel resentful that no one is helping them, but they won't ask for help themselves. So very similar, like sliding into that 8 where I'm fine, I can do everything myself, but also being like, but I'm helping everyone and no one's helping me.
I have literally, like, at my worst, moments been like this, like, I do everything, no one helps, no one is ever there for me. Like, that is exactly the kind of running, um, like, program that wants to, like, kick in when I'm upset, is like, it doesn't, nobody will ever help me. So it just doesn't even matter. And it's actually like, it's one of the things that Jay and I end up fighting about the most, is because he's like, I'm trying to help you. You just have to ask me. And I'm like, I shouldn't have to ask you. I just do everything for everybody without them asking
That's
me.
a key for 2, is I shouldn't have to ask. 2s are so good at helping everyone that they expect that everyone is equally as good as at helping them. So they have super
and just choose not to.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
When really they just don't ever ask for help. And so,
right.
You know, they
right.
don't.
Or the other way of saying it is like, I assume everybody is as empathetic and realizes what I need and then just doesn't do it.
Yeah.
But in fact, it's not just that I need to ask, it's that, like, they're actually not good at it. Like, they actually, like, I mean, Jay's just the best example because we've been together for so long, like, and it's daily. It's like, he just, like, doesn't see what I see. And so, like, I can see 500 ways to, like, help him or make his life easier, and he literally just doesn't see it. And then, of course, he has his own type and all the ways that our types, like, bring out the worst or the best in each other, which actually you and I can share about, like, how we bring out the best in each other as opposed to the worst.
Yeah.
But one of the things I wanted to say is, so I'm a 2 near a 3, like, my wing is 3, and the 3 is did you say the doer? I think I'd read it as the achiever.
Yeah, the same. The doer, the achiever, wanting to be the best.
Yeah. And not like, and one of the motivations with that is like other people thinking you're the best, which is like not what I resonate with as much, except for that I'm trying to help everybody. I'm like the wanting to be acknowledged and needed, like, then goes into like all of the achievement based stuff as well. And like wanting people to be proud of me was a huge, like, in my adulthood, realizing like wanting my parents to be proud of me is like not a good measure of my success. And yet that's what I was doing, you know, because it's that like outside recognition. And obviously, like, there are so many ways that this goes into my work. Like, it's kind of crazy when I look at like the business I have and like the motivations I was trying to get fulfilled. And then also, this can be when you have a teacher or somebody else you're following or somebody who's doing a business that you're like, oh, I want to pay attention to that, or just even in your life, right? Like another mom who's killing it, mom group. Sometimes they'll talk and their motivations will be so different. You either want to be like them or you're like, that makes no sense to me. Like people who just want a lot of big numbers, who are like true 3s, it just doesn't resonate for me, because I'd so much rather be helpful than I would be famous or like known or like, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So what are the ways, because we had a good conversation about this, the ways that, and like we're sharing this so that you guys who are listening can, when you figure out what type you are, like, look at how the relationships in your life, how the people, like, if I as a 2 need to be needed and appreciated for what I'm doing, and Jolie as an 8 needs to be in control, like, there are ways that we could really clash.
Right.
Like, especially if we're married to each other. We have to deal with each other every day.
Yeah. Okay. An 8 this is where it gets interesting for me. An 8 is best when they adopt the habits of a 2. So 8s want to be in control. When they're at their worst, they adopt the habits of a 5, which is the thinker. They go into their own head. They go very insular. They think about themselves, what they need, and they can stop moving into action because they get so in their own head. So that's when they're at their worst. When they're at their best, they're more adopting the habits of a 2, which is thinking of others. They're able to think about what other people need. They're able to appreciate other people because appreciating people, appreciating help, and thanking people can be seen as a weakness from an eight's point of view. If I need someone, if I appreciate someone, if I let someone do something for me, that's like opening up a chink in my armor. So, like, it's easy for an eight to close down, to just think about themselves and forget about everyone else. So, eights need to move into the two space and start thinking about other people. Twos, when they're stressed, become an eight. Twos, they start forgetting to ask for help. They become that part of the eight, and they can kind of become a little bit controlling, and they can.
And part of what I read about the controlling is like controlling as in like manipulative with other people. So like I think you spend a lot of time like or your controlling is about like your environment,
right,
and your own life and your own self, like your independence. But the two as the helper and the like connected to other people, the controlling part can be like, I need you to be exactly what I want you to be.
right.
And it's not just controlling my own self, which is like, to me, healthier. But like also like that, like I need everybody to do what I need them to do.
Right.
You need to like exactly fulfill my expectations.
Or I'll show
Crazy.
everyone how much they need me, like that type of attitude. But when twos are doing really good, they adopt the habits of a four, which is like the artist creative who's very in touch with their emotions. So twos are able to easily express what they need and they want, like when they're able to like take care of their own needs when they're at their best. So twos and eights are very connected, but they can bring out the best in each other, or they can bring out the worst in each other. So being married to a two as an eight, when I'm at my worst, I don't need anyone. I can do this all myself. Screw you. I'm not asking for help. I'm not going to acknowledge your help. I'm fine. Like I'm an island. And when twos are at their worst, so that triggers, right, a two's, oh my God, but I need to be needed. And then
Right. And so if you're like an island and you're like, I don't need you, but I'm in my own mind doing things to help you and you just are like, I don't need you. That's like crushing my core heart of like, oh my God. It's like you took the knife and you put it right in the weak spot.
So then what
because it's the one thing I need.
Yeah. Then twos, they close down. They become that insular eight. They stop talking. There's no communication because eight's an island and two's closed into themselves. There's no communication. Neither of them are asking for what they need, right? Twos don't want to ask for help. Eights don't want to ask for help. Great. No one's talking. No one's communicating. No one's asking for help. No, like they're just both islands. If they were at their best, twos would ask for what they need. They would share their emotions. Eights would be hearing what other people need and they would be reciprocating and they would be appreciating, and like there'd be so much more communication because they're both like twos are tapping into their emotions and asking for what they need, and eights are tapping into their inner twos and being able to receive help and like see the needs of other people.
And like the reason why you and I have like brought up is like we were literally, because we're friends, and this is so much easier in a friendship because with a spouse you have like years of like other stuff you're bitter or annoyed about, right? Like, and there's just a lot of daily annoyances, but with each other we're like, we don't live together, so we don't have all those daily annoyances. And like I will think, oh, I should ask Jolie this because Jolie needs that. And then my inner two-ness is like, don't bug anybody, don't ask for what you need. And I have made myself, especially over the last year or so, be like, but I know, and this is pre-Enneagram, I know that asking people for help makes our relationship stronger. Mm-hmm. And I want to have a friendship with Jolie. And if every time I think to ask her something and I don't ask it, like, we're never going to talk. Like, so I should, and I do this with my other friends as well. And even with my mom, like, to keep her like in my life, I will want a recipe for something. I could Google the recipe, but I'll text her to ask her for it because I know that what it is, it's not just like what you or her need, it's what I need. Like I need to be open. It's not really about how you guys
need to ask for help. Twos are at their best when they can ask for help and when they can ask for what they need. And eights are at their best when they're helping other people. So like, because Tara and I have this mutual relationship based on like a friendship where we help each other and it's not like I don't love helping people. It's just like
Right.
when I get stressed or triggered, like I come into my own head too much. So it's like, because our friendship, like, we don't have arguments, we don't have dishes, we don't have chores, we don't have kids
Or
together.
children.
Right.
We
Like,
don't have to discipline anybody together.
exactly.
That's key.
Then Tara's in a place where she can ask for help. I'm in a place where I can help, and I can, like, we can show her our appreciation, and we make time to talk to each other every week.
Right.
So 2s and 8s, when they get along great, and they do absolutely bring out the best in each other.
Yeah. And I really do feel like it's like realizing that like it's about opening up because, you know, like all of these motivations come from places we're trying to protect ourselves. Like you said about protecting yourself from being vulnerable. And I'm just trying to do it all on my own because I have some inner feeling that says that I'm supposed to be able to do it all on my own. And also that my job as a human being is to help other people and to put others first. Like, it's a big message in my childhood growing up. And so that, like, in order to grow, you have to figure out what that motivation and need is, and then like seek out to do steps that will almost open you up to the thing you're afraid of, right? So you have to open up to vulnerability, and I have to open up to asking people for help.
Yeah, literally, I have exercises for each type, like to help you move back. Because the way we kind of describe it is there's like 4 stages of motivation. There's when you're engaged, you're at your best self. There's resistance, which is when, like, how you respond to like immediate stressors. And then there's disconnected, when the stressors keep coming and coming and coming, like, what do you look like then? And then there's recovery, kind of moving back from disconnected up into balance. And so we have exercises, and like 8's exercise is allow yourself to be vulnerable. Like, that's like the number one thing I have to do, is allow yourself to be vulnerable and thank those who help you. And like 2's key thing is to notice how often you're giving to people when your cup is actually empty.
Yes. So what is the exercises for the 6? Because, you know, I want to help Jay by telling him what to do.
So 6 is a lot of being mindful, recognizing when the worst case scenarios scripts come up. So a 6, for those of you who don't know, is my book calls it skeptic but loyal. It's like the really pessimistic kind of person, but they're a super good friend. Like, they're loyal, but they see all the worst case outcomes of every scenario. So the kind of exercise is to really start to be mindful of when that worst case thinking is happening in your head, and realize that you're capable of more than you think you are.
That's hilarious. Because so one of the things with the 2 and the 6, because the 6, and this was a sentence that really, really resonated with Jay. They want to know what the outcome will be before they commit to something, because the minute they commit to something, they're all in. So he will often not make a decision until he can be sure that he's going to be able to do it. So, like, do you want to do this weekend? Well, I don't know. Let's see. Well, no, just do you want to do you want to do it this weekend? He won't be able to answer that question until he knows he can do it the weekend, which is crazy making. It's like a person who likes to make plans. And so often what a 2 will do when the 6 gets stuck in indecision and going around and around, they call it worst case scenarios. For Jay, it's more like just like uncertainty, like just like he's unwilling to commit to uncertainty. And when he commits, like, to the degree that he has stuck with agreements he's made or commitments he's made, even when the other person isn't aware of the commitment, when Jay makes it in his own mind, he will stick with it even when it's not good for him, even when he needs to let go of it, even when he needs to, like, move on. He's like, but I told this person I would do this. Yeah.
So would you say Jay is a 6 with a 5 wing?
I think he's actually a 6 with a 7 is what he thought.
Oh, interesting. Just because 5s tend to plan a lot. 5s, like
he doesn't plan.
Don't act.
Right. So here's the thing: is he has the hard time making a decision because he wants to know. He's not going to commit unless he can follow through, and if he commits, he's 100% going to follow through. There's just a million questions in your life you have to answer where you don't really know if you'll be able to follow through.
Right.
Like, hey, I want to see you this summer. We'd like to go to England this summer. Jay would just be like, well, we could do that. He would not make any steps to make it happen. So, like, I have to do all the planning, right?
Yeah.
Like otherwise. So that's actually one of the weaknesses, is that when a 6 gets swirly and like, I'm just not sure, the 2 will like come in and just be bossy and manage things because they're helping. And like, so I can easily move into bossiness because he's moving at his worst into inaction. And then I'm the one making the decisions, but then also feeling I'm not getting the help.
Yeah.
And for him, he's feeling like, I'm making him do things he's not yet ready or comfortable to do, like he's not ready to commit to. So telling somebody we're going to go to Thanksgiving this Saturday, if I say yes and he hasn't yet decided, it's like he feels committed. So anything that I say that he'll do, he's like, or that he says he'll do, there's no like, oh, I end up can't making it, right?
Right.
Like, there's just not, even if it makes no sense.
Yeah.
Like, it's kind of silly. But that, I think he leads more towards 7 than 5, because the 7 is like the optimist and the choosing fun. But what's the negative side of the 7?
The negative side of the 7, so when they're disconnected, they can actually feel really anxious. They can try to cram their schedule with more tasks than they can accomplish. And they can tend to become perfectionists, also kind of gloomy or serious, because they're just, that anxiety is kind of coming out. And so they kind of get really gloomy and stressed and kind of overwhelmed and really annoyed by like their self-limiting beliefs. Like they could become aware of like they're holding themselves back type thing.
Right.
So that's kind of the negative of a 7. Whereas the negative of a 5, 5s also try to bury themselves in tasks. When they're kind of stressed, they try and avoid, so they try and stay busy to avoid what's stressing them. They can become scattered, disorganized, argumentative, and stubborn.
Well, everybody thinks your spouse is stubborn. So I don't think that's probably not. No, Jay, when he read the 7, the description that you sent, he was like, oh, I definitely feel even more like a 7 than a 6, but it's, he's, when he read the full, like,
so when
he's like right there.
So 6s, so what I have written down is 6s are at their best when they can kind of basically stop overthinking things. For this, it says dismiss their fears about worst case scenarios, but I can see that not everyone's going to go to like the worst case scenarios. People, they just mean, like, they see like the negative. Oh, I can't follow through. I can't do this. So when they can get over that, and also they're able to stay on top of their habits without needing to rely on others. So that's when 7s or 6s are at their best. They feel that resistance when they're confronted with new ideas, new people, new situations, because this says they feel confusion about what direction to take because they have too many differing voices in their head. When they're disconnected, they can't relax. They can have endless streams of projects going on, and they can work overly hard to meet other people's expectations.
And that is like so in alignment with the Obligor.
Yeah.
Right. So like the Obligor, especially like one of the regular things around our house is he's like, I feel obligated to 2 people in this situation. And like, I'm right. Like, even if I try to talk to him when he's on the phone with somebody, he's like, I can't listen to both of you because I have to listen to both of you. And I'm like, everybody can just like move the phone away and listen to me for 2 seconds and then put the phone back. And like, you weren't really listening to that other person anyhow, who might be a parent. So like, you just like, but like literally in so many situations, if he's agreed to somebody that he'll do something and work because we need to blah, 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 or I need you to blah, blah, blah. He's like, it's for me, I don't care. I do the one that I care about more.
Yeah.
And I would just tell the other person, I'm sorry, I can't do it. But for Jay, it's a serious, like, and it's taken me a long time to realize it's very serious for him. He's not trying to be difficult or trying to say no to me. He's just like, it's a real struggle. It's because it taps into his core motivation and his core needs and for what he thinks a good person does.
Yeah.
Right. So for him, a good person, like the description I've read of the 6 calls it the loyalist.
Yeah. Like
for him, they stick with what they say. And that can be incredibly, I mean, it sounds like a good thing in the same way that a helper sounds like a good thing, right? But like it can actually make you like kind of crazy when you can't get out of it.
Well, that makes sense because the 3 in stress, or the 6 in stress becomes a 3. So
Yeah.
the 6 in stress is trying to please everyone and trying
Hmm.
to like get that basically picking choices based on what other people value and forgetting to pick choices based on what they value.
Yeah. Yeah. Which, as the selfless, constantly giving wife, I'm like, what? No, pick me.
Yeah.
But he wants to, like, even though, whatever commitment he has to me is probably his highest value, it matters a lot to him that he would let somebody else down,
Right.
you know?
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. Yeah. They all have good, and like there's not one that's better than the other. They all have good and then shadow sides, and the idea is to recognize what you're doing and recognize like when you're getting into your worst version of yourself and trying to kind of step back up into balance. Whereas like so if Tara's in balance, she can like help and ask for what she needs, and if Jay's in balance, then he cannot. Um, he can accept that sometimes you can't be loyal, right? Like he can accept that
Right.
sometimes commitments have to slide, and like that's okay.
Yeah. If you could tell him that, that'd be great. I need to book him a session with you. So we had, it was actually like over text and then the phone because he was out of town, like a good conversation about how that it kind of all fit together and how we make each other crazy, but how we cannot make each other crazy. And like one of the descriptions I read about how 2 and 6 in relationship can work together is like mutual admiration. Like we like each other's. I'm not a person who like I admire so much about him because it's just like not what comes naturally to me, right? Like he follows every rule every time, which is also part of his Myers-Briggs personality thing that comes up a lot, and I super admire that because I'm more like flexible and go with flow, and like that can be annoying sometimes, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's, and then he admires stuff about me. So there's like in the best case scenario, we're doing our own actions that bring us into balance, but also like you like what you see in the other person.
Yeah. Yeah. Same. I think I forget with 2s and 8s. I think like 2s and 8s do really well at like standing on their own like pillars. Um,
Hmm.
but yeah, they can at their best respect each other. Like 2s admire 8's ability to kind of do what they want, right? Like
Right.
they admire 8's ability to be strong and to stand up for themselves, whereas 8's admire 2's ability to be helpful and considerate and thoughtful. Um,
Right.
so
And I always think that, especially if you're in a couple, like you can then take that into the rest of the world. So when we interact with somebody, or if you two interact with a situation that needs you to be like, wait, let's put up strong boundaries. Like, let's do our own thing here, right? You can help make sure your own family is protected in that way. And when there's something that, like, maybe he needs to like move you guys in a direction that's being like, I don't know, volunteering or something. So your kids are also getting 2 different examples of what it's like to be like a good, loving human
yeah,
if you show them that you respect that in each other.
I've just like really enjoyed kind of diving into this whole world of Enneagrams. I did like all my kids, like, well, all my kids. I have 2. I did both kids.
Yeah.
And it was and it was like one of them was like super easy. Like I was like, "You're a perfectionist. Like there's no question." The other one we're not quite sure, but we think Rowan's an optimist, just because that kid is like he's always like on to the next thing. Like you give him something and he like a game and he's like, this is great. 2 minutes later, like, oh, but I really wanted that other game. Like, so, but he's still young. We'll see.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Because how old is Rowan?
7.
Okay. Yeah. So he's probably still just forming those,
Yeah, exactly.
core needs and motivations.
Yeah. Whereas Leo's just, he's, the thing is, I don't know actually if his core motivation is a perfectionist or if he's just like a perfectionist, but with actually a different core motivation. We'll have to see when that comes out. But
Yeah.
for right now, it's been really helpful, even with him. And I did another exercise, which I can talk about on a different podcast episode, that kind of related to this. And it's been really fun. So definitely check out Enneagrams or core motivation if you like any type of self-improvement stuff. I liked this because it was really reflective. Like when we've talked about self-improvement, and I've talked about in the past how I'm staying away from books written by dudes who just make me feel bad about who I am. This was
Yes.
very much a self-improvement, self-growth exercise, which is something that's important to me, that was not telling me like, here's what's wrong with you, change to become this. It was just like, here's who
Yes.
you are, and here's what you look like when you're at your best, and here's what you look like when you're at your worst, and just try and recognize what you're doing when you're kind of at your worst.
Yes, I totally prefer these things. I think this is why I like personality psychology. It's like these things that say, okay, accepting that you are who you are, like what does that mean? Because it just helps you like shine a light on why you're doing some things and why you regularly or you have patterns of behavior or patterns of relationships that are not helpful, like as opposed to being like, Jolie, you're a crap person and that's why you keep doing this behavior. You can say like, oh, it's like it comes from this motivation, and now that I understand that, I can decide to shift my actions. And it's like with the four tendencies, once you know how you react to expectations, then you can just set up your environment to give you that. You don't have to change. You can just make choices that'll make it easier for you.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I feel like the Enneagram does as well. So we'll link up some books and the quiz I took, which also one of the websites has a lot of really good descriptions of the types. And of course, you can book a session with Julie and talk. She'll help you talk about how to make the most of your type.
Yeah.
So, yeah, thank you so much for listening.
Thanks, guys. We'll talk to you soon.
Bye.